We are almost 2 months into this thing, and it's been really exciting. Are you guys enjoying the snow at all? Or are you ready for it to melt? Even my kids who have been out of school are ready to get back in school, so it's been surprising. We're going to meet this morning. We're going to also meet next week. Next week will be our last one of the year. And we'll take off for the holidays and come back strong in January. But we're going to get started this morning. What 1 Million Cups is basically we're here to educate the community on local startups. We're here to engage local entrepreneurs, and we're also here to accelerate their businesses. So we've got two great companies presenting today. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Leah Weholter, and she is the owner of Workman Forensics. So if you guys could, let's encourage her this morning.
Like you said, I'm Leah Weholter. I'm the owner of Workman Forensics, and I wanted to start with a little story. So a couple months ago, I came downtown, rushed downtown for a meeting with an attorney, and I actually found street parking. I was so excited. And I also had time to get to the attorney's office on time, so it was a good day. Until I got to the meter, and I counted the quarters there. I was very confused by this and getting frustrated, knowing I was going to be on time. And so I tried putting the quarter in the meter, and I realized the meter's full. So I thought about leaving a note on the windshield and maybe an extra quarter, and telling them, hey, I tried. And instead I thought, man, they'll realize the meter's full, no big deal. So I run upstairs to my meeting, have my meeting, come back down. I was surprised. I had a $15 ticket on my windshield. Now, I'm not trying to be cheap, okay? But it was the fact that I just felt ripped off. And I hate feeling ripped off. I think 9 times out of 10, whenever we feel ripped off, it's because we did our part, but somebody else didn't live up to their part of the argument, right? So, like I said, this whole situation was just not fair. Only I hate saying that life isn't fair, because then I remember my mom telling my sisters and me, girls, life isn't fair. And I feel like whenever that's said, sometimes it's like we just have to resign and we have to be okay with that. We have to be okay that life isn't fair. But for me, that's never settled very well. And now I can't say that I started working forensics because I decided I was going to eradicate all injustice, and that I was going to make life entirely fair for everyone. But there's always been something in me that I just wanted to make life a little better for somebody else, to level the playing field for people who had been ripped off. So let me give you a little bit about my background. When I was finishing undergrad and starting grad school, I was given the amazing opportunity to work for the FBI. And I worked here in Tulsa for 2 years on white-collar investigations under the direction of a forensic accountant. After working for them for 2 years, I went into public accounting and once again had some opportunities to work these kind of new forensic accounting cases. The downside was that I had to work tax returns in my downtime, and that was not very fun. So after 2.5 years, I left the public accounting world, and I kind of decided I'm just going to be a hippie for a while. That lasted a week because I didn't plan on leaving my job, and so I had not planned accordingly, so the whole hippie thing did not last very long. So I had 5 business ideas when I left, and trying to decide, okay, which one of these, and I have an MBA, so how am I going to make these businesses work? And so since I didn't have any money, I decided to order these in the order of what required the least amount of capital. And that was what required my computer, my certification, I'm a certified fraud examiner, and my dining room table. And then that required just pounding the pavement and meeting people. So 3 years ago, last month, I started Workman Forensics. And since then, I've worked well over 25 cases. It has just been amazing, and I've been given the opportunity to do lots of other things on the side besides Workman Forensics, which has just made this whole experience exciting. So what Workman Forensics is a firm that provides fraud investigation, forensic accounting, and fraud prevention for various clients. But all of that boils down to I'm a problem solver, and I wear 3 different hats. First hat, I'm an interpreter. I take financial information that's not understood by just anyone, and I look at what happened, and then I interpret this. Well, after you interpret something, you're going to have to be able to communicate it to your audience, which makes me a storyteller. Now, all of my stories are nonfiction. I don't make anything up. I don't try to make something fit the circumstance, but I tell the story in a way that the audience can understand, whether that is to the client, to an attorney, to a judge, or to a jury. And then finally, I'm a navigator. I help navigate and help my clients navigate through just the whole legal system. You know, do we take this case criminal or civil? And then I also help navigate all the professional relationships that are involved in these. Sometimes there's a miscommunication between an attorney and a client, and so I'll help them understand that. So who are my clients? I work with banks, I work with individuals, I work with businesses, and the businesses, sometimes it is, maybe they've been, I like this one. Sometimes they have been victims of embezzlement, or sometimes they're looking to have a partnership dissolution, or they've had a partnership dispute, as this picture shows. And then I also work with a lot of attorneys in just various cases, either on cases that involve those types of clients, or even just to advise the attorneys on what they're looking at. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to I'm a problem solver. No matter the client, no matter the case, my job is to be a problem solver and to bring just a little more justice, a little more fairness, and make my clients feel like I have their backs, no matter the situation. Thanks so much.
All right, let's open up for questions.
I am unique and different.
You can repeat the question.
Oh, sure. Are there other companies doing this type of work, or is this something unique and different? I'm unique and different in the fact that this is all I do as a firm. Many other firms, such as public accounting firms, and will also do this work.
So what makes you unique and different is particularly the way that you package.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. Do you, I'm sorry, no, go ahead. Do you see this as something that can be replicated? Is it scalable?
I think that there are elements of what I do that are scalable, and I've started developing those areas. Some of the consulting side of it that's based on my experience now.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, about how you intend to scale this? I guess what I'm saying is that anytime you have a personalized service like this, in order to scale it, you look at branch offices
Right.
and how would you train branch officers to operate the same consulting basis? You know, the H&R Block works very well.
Right.
So
So he's asking about scalability for this business. I have started developing different systems for specific types of investigations that would allow other people to do what I do. And then also I have another company called Report Fraud that is a fraud prevention service that is more of a systematic and a fraud reporting hotline and things like that that is much more scalable as well. Does that answer your question?
without dominating your questions here, what I would say is that would lead me to say, okay, well, tell me more about the one that's scalable.
Right. Those are still just in development. I don't really feel comfortable talking about.
That's okay. You'll be back in 6 months, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Sorry. So mine actually kind of builds off of that. Where do you see your company in 2 years and 5 years? What do you want it to be? Do you want it to be a large consultancy? Do you want it to be more of a scaled company, or do you think it's going to be more of a lifestyle, or just kind of that human interaction there? What kind of company do you want it to be?
I don't know how feasible this is, but I'd like for it to be a little bit of both. I'd like to create these offshoots that are scalable, that can, where other professionals can do what I do without requiring me to be a CEO of a large company. That's not my goal, to be the CEO of a large company. So where I can continue doing what I love to do while providing tools for people to do things that are similar to what I do. Does that make sense?
I guess I have two questions. First is a question, the second one is another question. So how do you differentiate things like fraud from just, because I run into a number of companies and they just don't have good financial processes, good financial practices. And so how do you differentiate fraud from just poor financial controls, poor financial management, you know what I mean, that sort of judgment?
Yes, because I actually work both, and I actually have both situations going on right now. Are you asking how you can how I would differentiate it, or how you with this company could differentiate it?
I guess what I'm kind of asking is how easy is it to sort of separate things that are just willful fraud versus things that are just poor management practices? And then kind of related to that is when we think about scalability, is there any, because I would expect that to be somewhat judgment based, and I guess the scalability, is there any way you can take it out of the judgment realm where you can actually process it over technology layer it in such a way that it actually is scalable? Because I would assume that's a point of the process.
Right, that's actually my biggest hurdle is there are so many things that based on experience, I go off my gut. And I have had employees, and so how do you teach people to make that judgment call? And that's actually my biggest hurdle. And just because so much is based off the gut, which is why I've had to take particular types of fraud and say, if it fits this pattern, this is how you investigate it, and make that part of it more scalable.
Are you saying that you have to how you establish an intent, and that's the difference between buildings and neighborhoods?
Whoa, that was a loaded question.
You know what I'm saying? Because the difference, the same bullet that's murdered, if it's manslaughter, the difference is intent. So, are you saying that you look at that and understand that that reaction?
I don't think intent, but understanding there is a bright line between poor financial management and fraud, but to be able to walk into a situation and determine that is kind of based on a gut feeling and based on experience, looking at the surroundings and saying, your risk for fraud is very high because of these things. And then you go in and you look at which of these areas have that high risk, and then you identify as money missing. So I don't know that the intent is necessarily a gut feeling. Intent is usually found in evidence.
Right.
Leah, you mentioned a minute ago that there were some other firms that also did forensic accounting. What have you done, since this is pretty exclusively what you do, what have you done to set yourself apart from maybe bigger firms that all offer multiple services? From a marketing standpoint, how do you approach that to position yourself?
I have been, I think, more creative in some of my marketing approaches than perhaps, no offense to any public accounting firms, but more of the public accounting firms. Plus, they have different sources of revenue that are their bread and butter, and so their focus is a little different. From a marketing standpoint, I think that my background and my ability to navigate both sides of the system, the criminal system and the civil system, has created a lot of value for clients to understand, oh, this is the most efficient method. Instead of saying, I've been stolen, oh, somebody stole money from me, I'm going to spend all this time filing criminal charges, when they don't even have a criminal charge to file or knowing where to file that. So that typically is what sets me apart from other professionals I use.
You mentioned when you first got started, you sat down and said, okay, well, what's going to require the least amount of startup capital? Do your laptop, your experience, and your kind of computer. And it's a two-part question. First, the way that you price your service, I would assume every case is unique, and so there's probably different time investments. So how do you structure your pricing, and then when you sat down and started getting this thing up and running, how do you start at your price point, and has that changed from when you started to now?
Yes, that's a good question. So when I first started, I had public experience where we didn't charge for it, and public accounting experience, government experience where we didn't charge, and then public experience, public accounting experience, where we did charge by the hour. So that was my model, was an hourly billable rate. I started extremely low. I didn't realize I was that low because I thought, I'm working for my dining room table. This is way better than what I was making, right? But then I discovered that I needed to look at, and my rates were that, and that allowed me, I think, to get my foot in the door some places. Some people thought, you know what, this is a pretty little bet, on this girl. She's just starting out. We're not going to lose a whole lot of money on this deal. But then I started realizing that I needed to observe the market rates for client and case, the level of clients and casework that I was wanting to work. And then, of course, my overhead increased. So now my rates are a little over double where they started. But as I develop these other more scalable models, I'm able to offer some project rates on very specific kinds of investigations.
Is it public knowledge to find out where the market rates are from competitors? How do you find out? Well, now they know what the A, B, and C, that this is what they're charging. I mean, how do you go about it?
I network with tons of professionals that are specifically in my field, and so I was kind of able to judge where that was. If there's someone doing what I do in town, I really try to meet them, because usually we don't do the exact same thing, and so then a lot of times we can work together on projects, which allows me to learn more about their model and their business and things like that.
My question, well, I was just pretty much covered that since, but I was wondering, when you network as part of the team up on that base, how are you networking and what states are you licensed? So, maybe.
Now, Workman Forensics is an entity in Texas and Oklahoma, and so I have worked cases in Texas. The cases in Texas, I am a consultant. I'm a private investigator here in Oklahoma. I'm not a CPA, so as far as licensing goes, I'm a private investigator.
So it's accounting forensics and not like digital forensics, like
Right.
sending an email for like police or something like that,
No, mine's a
What do you need the next? What do you need most in the next 6 months? Things at the top of your needs list. How is that going to change over the next 6 to 12 months?
My goal for 2014 is to meet more people. That's really always my goal. The more people I meet, the more people I can serve. That's probably my most. Meeting people that are influential in the community, attorneys are great sources of referrals and leads, and then banks, even some nonprofits and foundations. I've done quite a bit of work in nonprofits, and so meeting with those types of individuals to help prevent fraud is a good promise as well.
So, you've been 3 years this
Yes.
month? Congratulations, 3 years
Thank
is a long time for an early company. What would you say is like one tool or one process or one thing you've learned that like has changed the way that you just run your business, regardless of what you actually do, but just running a business, invoicing, CRM? Was there something you're like, oh my gosh, I couldn't live without this now?
My cash flow worksheet. One of my very first cases was assisting someone who had been appointed by the court to be a receiver, where they went in and essentially on behalf of the court and the creditor, they took over a company and tried to determine if the company was salvageable or not. So while working for him, every project he works on, he uses a cash flow worksheet. And I discovered this thing, and oh my gosh, this is going to save my life. And that was something that, I'm an accounting major, I have an MBA, but that's something just very practical that we don't necessarily learn And so being able to say, okay, if my clients pay me this day, these are all the bills that are coming up, and just being able to see it all on a spreadsheet saved my life.
Sylvia, how can we as a community help you?
I think just through connections, by meeting people and then also doing presentations to create community awareness about fraud. I walk into a situation and I immediately assess where the fraud risks are, but that's not everyone's perspective. And so if I can help create just a little bit of doubt, for lack of a better word, a little bit of skepticism in some business owner's mind, then perhaps we can prevent fraud or catch it before it's $1 million problem.
Do you find that you're called upon by other people in your industry that are looking for a key component of a project that they're working on with your expertise without sending directly? Are you at the head of the project most of the time when you take something on, or do you get calls from other people in your industry saying, I need you to do this?
I do get calls from other people. Like I said, a lot of people that are in this forensic accounting umbrella actually do several different things. And so sometimes they don't, one of my specialties is that I trace money. And so some of the forensic accountants don't trace money. They maybe do business valuation and it's part of forensic accounting and litigation. So sometimes we'll just team up on projects. So I'm not always the lead.
You primarily investigate certain type of person, like trust manager or something. Do you find that you're investigating a certain type of client or case over and over again, like a trust manager or something like that? People that are in the arena where they're in receivership and they have lots of opportunity to move funds to different places where they shouldn't necessarily be.
Right, exactly. That's actually my number one case I work in. The first area of developing systems for scalability has been in the area of investment investigations, and which could also be partnership disputes and things like that. Typically, I didn't go into it today, but there's something called the fraud triangle that is a theory that's foundational for my credential as a certified fraud examiner. And the idea is that if you have a pressure or an incentive coupled with an opportunity and a way to rationalize, then your risk of fraud increases. And so a lot of individuals that have committed fraud are those people that have something happen in their life and they have an opportunity, and typically that opportunity involves they are the most trusted employee. They're the most trusted person in some type of relationship. They handle all of the money and no one looks over them. They have typically been, like I said, just the best employee. And I always tell people your best employee is your greatest liability, because they know that they have your trust and confidence and that you're not going to double check them. And then whenever they can rationalize what they're doing. So here in Oklahoma, gambling is very popular. And so a lot of times those people who maybe are addicted to gambling, if they have an opportunity to access funds when they've run through their own, then they will rationalize, I'll win this back this weekend. So that's that rationalization. I've actually worked a lot that involve women, typically at the office manager, bookkeeper level. And so their pressure or incentive is shopping. A lot of them. I've worked very few gambling cases on my own. It's been shopping. Because the women want to buy gifts for everyone. They want to be the cool mom. They want to, have the nice house. And so those are typically what I work. I work those so much more than anything else.
Is the ratio different? Is it more women than men?
I don't. For me, yes, and I don't know why. I did read some research once that said that men steal more as a dollar amount than women, and I personally think that's just depending on the hierarchy and the percentage of men in certain roles, as opposed to women. But most of my cases in this area have dealt with women. That's not all of them, but.
So you guys like to pilfer?
I don't know what the
Guys
deal is.
grab
Right, right. They just take a little bit here and there. Yeah, yeah. Actually, I'm a volunteer with Tulsa Police Department as well in their financial crimes unit, and a lot of the cases I've worked there too are women. So I don't know what the deal is.
Right on. Well, thank you so much, Leah. Just as another reminder, next week will be our last 1 Million Council meeting for the year, and then we'll start back up after the new year. We do have one announcement from Dave, real quick, and then we'll get on to our next presenter.
How's it going, everybody? You got to help me out here by a round of applause. Give it up for Workman Forensics. So anybody here who's a first-time visitor to Million Cups? You guys get complimentary high fives and free coffee in the back. Cool. Just a quick update. I work for DJ Connection, which some of you may be familiar with. We're right down the street, 16th in Boston. A lot of people don't know we actually have 7 companies that work all in the same office. Some very rare companies that would never blend together. We've managed a way to make it work. And we're actually going to be launching tours every week on a weekly basis, immediately following this meeting. It can take about 8 to 10 people. It's going to be starting right after the first of the year. We have an OSU class coming through for a marketing class that I'm going to be doing. But you guys are all going to be more than welcome to come through for a tour and see how companies start small. We've got some companies that are in the launch phase right now that are working out of our office, and we have some companies that have been there for 10 years. Some companies that you may recognize a little bit more. But we're launching tours on a weekly basis. We're going for that Zappos feel. I don't know if you guys know about Zappos, but we're looking for that Zappos feel, and we're trying to bring that here to Tulsa. So starting right after the first of the year, if you're interested, just get with me after the meeting. I'll get you guys more information, and give it up one more time for Justin.
All right, our next presenter is going to be Topeca Coffee. They're a local coffee roaster here in town. I'm sure that most all of you are very familiar with them. They have pioneered something that in our industry people strive for as kind of the golden bullet for coffee, which is cup sustainability. So we've invited them to come up and talk a little bit about their company. We've got John Gabarino and Ian Pico talking about their philosophy of business as well as what their second stage growth is for the next little bit. So let me introduce these fellas, and it's my pleasure, Ian Pico and John Gabarino.
Hey, my name is John Gabarino. Some of you guys may know about the company, but today what we're going to try to talk about is get some outside the box ideas on how we can grow. We started in 2002, September, here in Tulsa. The company actually kind of started around 2000 when the market price for green bean coffee beans dropped below 50 cents, got to about 42 cents per pound for what the farm is paying, which is at the time was about 50 cents below cost. Cost was about 90 something cents at the time. So if you sold a pound of coffee as a grower, you lost money. You do that for a year on and year in and year out. It is very expensive. And so the issue that we decided, my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law started the company about a year before I got involved. My mother-in-law was sitting on my couch coming to visit her new grandchild and asked if I wanted to get involved because the solution that they saw was not that the coffee industry was a bad industry to be in. They had been in it for 150 years, but it was the volatility. And that volatility gave opportunity for the middle guy to make all the money. And so the price point from what it cost to produce the coffee and what it was actually sold to the end consumer here in the United States or Europe or around the world, there was more than enough margin for everyone to make money. It was just that the amount of funds was distributed unevenly. And so what we have done in the past and some of the issues that we've solved is we started off with just roasting coffee in Tulsa with coffee from our farm. That was kind of a concept that we stuck to. And it was great in the beginning because it forced us to be experimental on the farm level. It gave us a lot of notoriety for the things that we have done at the farm level, but it kind of held us back. And then about 5 years ago, we were forced, because of a low crop, to expand and start roasting coffees from around the world, just like every other roaster. So as as a roastery now, our volume is about 60%, 50% coffee from our farms, and about 40 to 50% coffee from around the world, Ethiopia, Panama, Peru, just depending where you want to go today. One of our challenges, and one of the things that we want to talk about, there are two issues. One of them has been branding. And I've gone through, this is about the second phase, I think, of rebranding. Originally it was spelled with a K. My mother-in-law didn't realize there's a Topeca, Kansas. And so it was always Topeca, but in her mind, she pronounced it it was spelled with a K. And so I convinced them to go ahead and actually change the spelling at least to a C instead of a K. But we've always still been challenged with the pronunciation as Topeca instead of Topeca. And the only thing I think that can have less recognition of specialty than Tulsa and specialty foods is Kansas. And so that goes on to the next stage, which is how are we, as a specialty brand that's doing things that honestly, and Justin and I have talked about this a lot, that no one in the industry is doing. And we just recently got top 22 coffees in the nation, Good Food Awards. We had the top 30 one of the top 30 coffees voted by Coffee Review. And all these things are things that we have refocused our branding and tried to get people to recognize the marketing value of, or us focusing on the value of brand and marketing, not just on what is in the bag, which has been always my focus. I always felt like if I invested all my resources in having what's the best product in the bag, then people would figure it out. But our challenge has been figuring out how to get people outside of Tulsa to recognize that. I have a habit of talking too much, so that's why I have this guy. He's awesome. And so I'm going to pass the mic to him, and he's going to kind of continue, and then any Q&A you guys have.
Yeah, so I came on with the company about 4 years ago. Back then it was literally like 3 employees, owner, roaster, and I came on as a packager. At that time we had just gotten an account with Reese's grocery stores getting our product on the shelves there. And so that really started a snowball effect of growth for us and being able to do more and more volume. And of course, that bad crop year and then purchasing coffee from all around the world allowed us to get more wholesale cafe customers. But it's really, so from 3 employees we grew, I've got 8 or so employees, I think, on the docket. And so a lot of that initial resources that we had, the money that we had to spend, was going into production, into being able to manufacture enough product to serve the demand. Now we're this year kind of in a place where that growth has changed, or that we have enough resources now that we can start to focus money and stuff into growing our brand. And we've hired on a brand strategist or marketing employee about 3 months ago to start this process of changing the look of our company and the feel of our company. And so he's starting to take small steps, and we're kind of looking at a 6-month projection or into the next year of where we want to be as far as the look, the branding, the logos, trying to make our company appeal to a national or regional customer, and make it something different from what we feel is kind of, a stale kind of look, and it doesn't really...
Okay, I'm going to cut you off there,
Sure.
but I'm going to help you. I'm very interested. I've been a big fan of Topeca for a long time and had to educate people on how to say it the right way. Here's your packaging. Could you talk a little bit about, I have 2, but the first is continue along the conversation of the branding. I'm interested in, where you guys are going from here. A lot of people, they see Topeca. I mean, I like the new sign down here on 3rd Street. You can see it. But what sort of things are you guys going to try and bring out with your actual logo and some of the look that you're going for?
So I think, there's a couple things here. We, on the crest, on the back of this shirt has always been part of the imagery, and it's something that we've debated a long time. Do we get rid of the crest? Does it work as a logo? The problem with the crest is it's great when it's nice and big like this, but once you shrink it down, it gets very muddied and it's great detail, so it doesn't really translate there on a sizable scale. You know, Mitch has come in and cleaned up some of the text that used to be more layered. We've always gotten, so this is kind of a, you know, generation 2.0 of our bag design now. It's just really an intermediary solution until we are able to pour much more time and money into the look. But basically, we want clean, elegant. It's something that we've always gotten compliments on from our old bags, how clean and sharp looking it was.
Cool. Okay, and then follow up to that. Follow up is one of the reasons we wanted to have you guys present is, in a way, you guys have sort of gone back to becoming a startup because you're looking to get outside of Tulsa now. Can you address that a little bit more directly? Just sort of the plans on, we're in Tulsa. If you're in the coffee community in Tulsa, obviously everybody knows Topeca. More and more people are starting to understand who you guys are. What's sort of the plan? What are you guys looking forward to get outside of Tulsa and expand from there?
It's one of the biggest challenges for us, for me, has been developing a company based on the population of Oklahoma, which is less than 1,000. And so we also, I think, pride myself personally, and I think as Oklahomans, to be frugal. And so our coffee, for instance, the exact same coffee sells by other roasters for sometimes 50% more in Portland and San Francisco. There are roasters like Ritual and Water Avenue and 49th Parallel. They're all huge brand names in the specialty coffee industry that sell our coffee for $20 a pound versus we have to sell it for $15, so it's a less just to get, because that's the market we're in. And so what I want feedback from you guys is how, if you guys have ever had the experience of trying to market a brand that isn't barbecue sauce, that kind of resonates with Oklahoma, but especially coffee. You know, I mean, especially coffee when you think of Oklahoma, it doesn't necessarily, it's not bread and butter, they don't necessarily go together. And so our challenge is how do we grow outside of Oklahoma and maintain that, and overcome that. And that's one of my goals also, is bringing that recognition to Tulsa, and create that recognition of quality.
Question, Becky. Yeah.
Okay, anytime you come out with a logo and then you change it, sometimes there's a risk to that. Are you basing your change of your brand with your branding guy that's doing branding for you on anything other than just design preference? Have you done any kind of perception testing in Tulsa as to what people here think and maybe where their brains are and what they think of the logo and the way that you are and your coffee in general? Have you done any of that type of activity?
I mean, we haven't really done full-scale research or studies, you know, polls or anything about what we've done so far. Like I said, this was really just a quick solution to replacing an older style label I had for this line of coffee, which was just done by me in my spare time, just grabbing images off of you know, pay-for image sites and, you know, affecting them somehow and throwing our logo on there and putting the coffee information. And that got really tedious as new coffees kept coming in. And I kept having to spend more and more time on this that I didn't have. So we wanted to standardize our look. And we have gotten lots of feedback from just customers and employees of, oh, I like this, I don't like this. That's been very informal and not strategized.
So I have a couple of things. One is, purchase, bought one of the very first grinders. Printed it actually. So big, huge fan. A couple of things come to mind. One is that I understand your hesitancy in letting all of your brand decisions be made from the small handful of people that live in the area of Tulsa. I applaud you for getting into racers. I think that was a really good move. Their distribution centers are more accessible. Certainly there are people who have experience 40 plus years in especially food sales, regionally and nationally, that you tap into if you knew somebody. And there are a lot of reasons that I love the brand. Primarily is because every time I go to one of your retail stores, the experience is exceptional. The people are wonderful. causes me to question what's in me. So a backstory on that, if it's not entirely completely true, would be a fantastic story to lead with. And I've watched some of your videography, it's fantastic as well. I think whoever did that for you with the jazz over the Just Bend, you want to keep him on staff. I know it's really expensive, but he's worth it. It's underutilized, I think. So tell the story maybe of the professional barista so that when people come in, they feel like they know someone, you're there. There's definitely some things about your story that are left out. Imagery that you have at the Mayo there, that is wonderful. The faces of the growers and the people who are touching the product. And your stories maybe were told early on, but those need to be recycled in case somebody missed it. So I look forward to getting together with you when you guys have time.
Without knowing your guys' story or knowing much about your company, you guys mentioned that you guys are doing things that no one else is doing. So before suggesting branding topics and national marketing campaigns, what do you guys do that's so unique compared to all the other roasters around?
So jerk trade is kind of a term that has become very popular, and especially coffee. And the idea is based on that concept of that there is plenty of money between the grower and the consumer for everyone to make money. And the issue is that the middle guy's making all the money. And so by taking the individual out, there's two things that happen. One is there's a connection where I know as a roaster that I have consumers that will pay a higher price for high quality coffee, and so therefore I can actually go to the grower and pay a higher price versus a middle guy that's just going to be passing on and taking a percentage cut. It's much more difficult for him to take that kind of risk and pay a higher price. There's a lot of growth in what people call direct trade, but isn't necessarily direct trade, where there's direct sourcing, where people go and go to a farm, visit a farm, and they buy a very small lot of cream basically off the top of the mill. And they outsource the financing, they outsource the shipping, they outsource the warehousing. And so at the end of the day, the farmer's really not necessarily making a whole. Additionally, when you take the cream off, the value of the milk is less. And so you are only helping that farmer if you take and pay enough for that cream that it compensates and also adds on value essentially to the product. And it's one of the big debates right now. So what we do is I actually, we run our individual businesses separately. It's all one family company. The farms, the mills on the farm, the roastery that imports it, our cafes, or my wife actually runs and technically owns them. Versus I technically, we joint file, so it's all the same, I guess. But the roastery, and so she's my customer. My wife's my customer. The shop at the Mayo and the Hyatt and Hodges Bend, and now we're opening as of Monday the Heirloom Bakery on Cherry Street. They're all my customers as far as the roastery. And so what we do though is different. Is we actually go and I pay my brother. I go and taste the coffees at the farm, which is 90 days. But I pay them ahead of time. I pay them in full. I actually do the import and export myself. We warehouse the coffee here. And all that integration and vertical integration allows me to provide more resources to him. And it's more based on the fact of, you tell me what you need to be paid in order to make a good profit on the farm level for the quality coffee that I'm telling you I need. Because I know that my consumers are willing to pay this much, and this is the coffee that they're wanting. And so by literally doing the full vertical integration, which is extraordinarily difficult, because the more you add on, the more complex it is. There's a reason why people specialize in individual segments of that process. It is difficult, but at the same time, at least in my opinion, so far for us financially, it's been very important. It's much more sustainable.
Yeah.
One last thing is that direct trade is translated into, and very few people. It's just now literally, this was a big discussion in the Roasters Guild retreat this year. Was that whether or not micro lots, which is a very common term right now, is that where the farmers are being paid a lot more for that small micro lot of coffee that's exceptional quality, whether or not that's actually a good thing for sustainability, because it only makes sense, like I was saying, if they're being paid so much more that it compensates for the reduced value of the rest of the coffee. So what I actually do is I import coffee that is probably an 80 cup score. It's not bad. It has very few defects. If you look at it, it's great pretty coffee, but I heat you not in smaller bean size, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, it just is not as complex. So we actually pay a much higher price than he normally would get paid for that coffee, and then I actually sell it to hospitals and to larger organizations. So even though that also helps me because it increases my volume, so it helps with shipping, it increases my volume and my revenue streams, so I can afford to have equipment that I may not necessarily otherwise have. And in the end, all that though is ideas to focus and allow us to be able to have the farm making more money and me allow me to have more equipment and resources.
I make these comments realizing I've just spent 17 minutes and 58, 59, now 18 minutes exposed to the coffee industry. So I don't know enough about the coffee industry, but I won't stop me from opining. I mean, it seems like you've got a decision of, do you want to be a wholesale bean provider to any number of coffee companies, or do you want to do this more retail play, which you're kind of trying to do? And so I think the retail side is interesting, but it's very expensive. It's expensive to build a retail brand. My sense of the people that have built a successful retail coffee bean brand is because they've got retail coffee shop branding. Starbucks, you go buy Starbucks coffee. Dunkin' Donuts, you buy Starbucks. So at Pete's, you go buy Pete's coffee. So I think you're kind of, it seems like you're kind of stuck in between the two to a certain extent, where you're sort of doing the bean play, but then you're kind of into retail. It seems like you kind of have to either go the wholesale bean provider to a bunch of vendors, or do you, if you're going to go this way, you need to raise a lot of money to build this national brand that's beans on the back end of this national coffee.
That's been kind of a necessity, and that's one of the challenges of a lot of roasters currently in Oklahoma, is that there's just not enough market necessarily as a wholesaler to make the revenue and the bean movement that you need in order to pay the bills. And it's, we don't live in a city that has, we don't live in a state or a city that has a huge population. We don't have a city and state that consumes the level of coffee that they do in the East and West Coast. And so my first coffee shop that we opened was the Mayo, and it was purely out of necessity in the sense of just trying to grow. How can we grow? And grocery stores, I've gone up to Syndex, which was a family chain of grocery stores in Milwaukee, and it was great, but it died because in order to go into another city, you really have to spend a lot of money to have a presence. You need to have, possibly have a roastery there, or have a full-time employee that's marketing, pushing it, sampling it. So it's a big investment in order to make that move. And so the growth of my retail side has really been because there's just not necessarily a lot of outlets for me to sell our coffee at. There's a lot of volume of coffee sold, but a lot of it's low price. And so my focus right now, my trying to grow, is how do I grow as a wholesaler? That's what I'm asking, is how do I grow as a wholesaler outside of Tulsa, as a roaster, to other outlets, mostly coffee shops is the best market as a Tulsa-based roaster.
Hi, I understand how you keep an eye on the local growing of the beans, but when you're dealing with 40% of your beans coming from other countries, how do you, one, establish those connections in other countries, and two, how do you keep an eye on it and make sure they're growing up to your standards and things like that?
Right, so I have a relationship with several small direct trade importers that are doing relationship trading in other countries with producers or with cooperatives that do that work for me, and I trust them that they're going to bring in good coffee each year, each season, and then I work with them. So in that instance, they're the middleman, they're doing that work, and I'm paying a premium on those beans for that work. And so I really only work with people that I come to trust and know that they're getting me really quality stuff, and that the money is actually making it back to the producer, and that there's good conditions on the farm or the cooperatives. This year we're going to try to go to, maybe this year or next, to Africa to actually directly source and directly trade coffee. But that takes a lot of resources and a lot of money, and I would need to be able to make it feasible financially to go to another country and source beans. I'd have to have enough volume to be able to ship a container's worth of coffee, which is a lot of coffee, about 40,000 pounds of coffee. I do that much within all of the different origins I do, but not with any one specific country. So Ethiopia is about really the only one that we do a substantial amount of coffee that we could feasibly import a half a container to a container.
You know, we are trying to expand the concept of what we do with our farms in El Salvador. I sent Ian to Guatemala earlier this year and developed a relationship with some farmers there. My main goal is we kind of looked over all the numbers in our location that we feel is most economically potential, has the most economic potential for returns for both us and farmers. It's going to be Africa and Ethiopia, just because we consume so much coffee from there. And so talking to wonderful Tulsans like this guy back and dealing with importers that we already deal with, that's the hope of trying to figure out how we can expand this concept to more. As a small, really small local Tulsa-based grocery to be doing what we're doing, and to try to grow that is not an easy thing. And, there's a gentleman also in town, Eric English, that I work with, that we're trying to plan a trip to Haiti this year to go actually. I'm going to go for free with my own time to try to give consulting on how these farmers can increase the quality of their farm and the production that they're doing, and see about trying to help coordinate with my experience of logistics of import-export and how I can actually help him bring a container in, and we would help afford to do that through buying part of it. We're just now at that stage of trying to, the last 2 years, translate the experience that we've developed in doing this to outside of that single connection outside of
So I see, or I continually see that we live more and more in a good enough society where we don't really, the mass market doesn't really care about quality enough. It's like, it's good enough, they'll be buying MP3s, whatever. How do you educate your potential customers on what is good coffee? I know I've brewed Topeca coffee for people before that. Why does this taste weird? Because you've never had good coffee before. You've always had burned coffee, or that's just what they're used to. How do you educate your customers?
We really started one customer at a time, just coming in face to face, holding events. There's events around town, latte art competitions and stuff, which are more cultural coffee things than education. But we really care about education with employees and also customers. And so if you go to our website, a lot of information there, links to our Mills website. But once a month, kind of as my, what I like to do for the community, give back to the community education-wise, is I do a free coffee cupping, specialty coffee cupping, the first Friday of every month. It's actually got canceled last Friday, so it's this Friday at 10 a.m. It's a free public thing. I can't handle too many people at once, but up to about 10 people. And you can go onto the website and sign up and reserve a space for that. Again, that's the first Friday of every month. There, I talk about everything, the whole supply chain, and then you gotta taste what makes specialty coffee special. And then I also have other educational classes that you can pay for that are also listed on the website under the Learn tab.
There's these women that are having these home parties across the nation, and there's 3 different companies that sell kitchen supplies. If you thought about piggybacking on them, and then have the online sales, that way you get the coffee in the mouths of the women across the nation.
If you guys haven't been to a Friday morning with Ian, you need to go. It's definitely worth the time. So go ahead.
Well, so one other thing that I wanted to come back to, just on the education standpoint, I wanted to give these guys an opportunity to talk a little bit, but they are our house roasters. We use 75 to 80% of our coffee is Topecas. And back to your question about education, these guys spent, before we opened, we spent 6 to 9 months of training. That once we signed a contract, what they offered was free training for me and my staff for 6 months. And so they gave us an opportunity. They equipped us to educate the people. Well, because we are showing them product, and they gave us the tools to do that well. And so the reason that our baristas are so effective at serving you guys well is because they have been trained by some of the best coffee in the country, and it's something that happens a lot behind the scenes, but is effective in the way that we can educate the mass majority. And Topeca has always done a great job of investing in the community. They have donated all the coffee on the cups, so all the coffee that you bring to the provided by Topeca. And so they are, as much as they are passionate about making coffee sustainable, they're also passionate about Tulsa and investing in the entrepreneurial and just the community aspect of the city. So we're so proud to be working with these guys. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm just revisiting into this sooner, but I'm very interested in what Topeca means and what is the Topeca story. In other words, you talked about your logo not being reducible photographically and this crest, and you talked about changing the spelling of it, but and I asked for your sack because I immediately turned the sack over and I wanted to know that story. And you know, I had never heard of Topeca, but the minute you put the bag out, I've seen the bag, and I don't know where it's. I'm from Springfield, which is just a few hours up the road. So there's some outlet over in Springfield where I've seen your coffee. You know, so my question is, from a branding standpoint, what's that story? Okay, and if and probably this is probably a little late in the game to be asking this, so I apologize for that. And then I also, in that story, I'm searching for the differentiation in your brand, because it seems to me that you suffer from the same problems that a local winery would or a craft brewed beer. You know, everybody has an African peaberry, everybody has an Ethiopian, everybody has a wheat beer, everybody has a lager. You know what I'm saying? So you know, if we, to not drag this out longer, because I see you jumping in, go ahead and jump in, because I can talk to you afterwards.
Yeah, if you can do it in 45 seconds, go for it.
So long story short, Topeca is just one of those names that doesn't mean anything. We're trying to figure out, my mother-in-law was trying to figure out a name that sounded good, and it's my wife's nickname. When she was little, her name was Margarita, and when she would pronounce it when she was little, she said Topequilla, and so it came out as Topeca, and that's where the name came from. Ironically, even in El Salvador, when they've done tastings, people have seen the spelling and be like, that's not how you spell Topeca. It's a made-up word. So, but it has a little bit of history because it comes from my wife's name.
Here's what's really cool, in 40 seconds or less, that is an awesome story. And that is the story of your brand. We should be telling that story. As simple as that may sound, it differentiates you from every other name. So when you say it's kind of an odd way it comes up with a name, because in its oddness, it is extremely
Good. All right.
All right, so we've got everybody staying around, both Workman, Forensic, and Topeca will be here. Just to be conscientious of time, we're going to cut it off, and we hope to see you next week. Stick around, talk as much as you'd like. Thank you guys for coming. See you next week.